When Star Wars A New Hope was first released in theaters, it was a massive hit. Audiences loved the story and the characters. Well, like most scripts, A New Hope went through many different versions. Over time, the story changed and evolved until it became the story that we all know and love. Well, in 2013, Dark Horse Comics made an 8-issue comic run based on George Lucas's original draft that he wrote in 1974. Titled simply, The Star Wars. I really enjoyed reading this version of the stories. There's a lot of really cool differences and a few similarities to the Star Wars that we know. So in today's video, I wanted to go over the comic of the original Star Wars draft. I'm not going to be reading every single line. I'll be doing a brief summary of each issue. I'll be cutting out some of the subplots and stuff that I don't think is super important. So I definitely encourage you guys to check it out for yourselves. I really enjoyed it. Alright, so the story starts out with a title crawl similar to the ones that we get in the movies. However, we learn from here that there are already a few differences. Here's what the opening crawl says. Until the recent Great Rebellion, the Jedi Bendu were the most feared warriors in the universe. For 100,000 years, generations of Jedi perfected their arts as the personal bodyguards of the Emperor. They were the chief architects of the invincible Imperial Space Force, which expanded the Empire across the galaxy, from the celestial equator to the farthest reaches of the Great Rift. Now these legendary warriors are all but extinct. One by one, they have been hunted down and destroyed as enemies of the new Empire by a ferocious and sinister rival warrior sect, the Knights of the Sith. So our story starts out on the 4th moon of Utapau, where Jedi Kain Starkiller and his 2 sons, Deke and Anakin, are living. One day, while Kain is training his sons, a mysterious knight lands on the planet. The 3 go to investigate the ship. Kain then leaves his 2 sons on the ridge and goes to inspect the ship alone. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the knight appears in front of Deke and Anakin and quickly cuts down and kills Deke. Anakin draws his lightsaber and attacks the knight. Kain then returns and assists his son. After a brief battle, Kain cuts the knight in half. After a short funeral where they light Deke's body on fire, the 2 head for the Aquilian system, the last free system in the galaxy. Okay, so after this, we cut to a different version of the Imperial capital. The Imperial capital in this universe is on the planet Alderaan. It's here that we meet a very different version of the Emperor. Instead of being a Sith, he seems to just be a politician who manipulates events. He gives a speech where he vows to invade the Aquilian system. Okay, so a little after this, we get our first introduction of Vader. He's in a room with 2 politicians who are celebrating the fact that they are no longer under control of the royal families. They also discuss the invasion and whether or not the Jedi are still around. Now this is a very different version of Vader. He doesn't need to wear a mask to survive, and while he has a few scars, he isn't burned. He's also sometimes referred to as General Vader. He almost seems to be a little bit more like Tarkin in this universe, a military strategist who doesn't have the Force. After this, we visit the planet Aquili, which reminds me a little bit of Naboo. Here, the king and the council are discussing what to do next. Some want to accept a treaty with the Empire, and others, like General Luke Skywalker, want to fight. I think it's funny how Luke Skywalker in this version kind of looks a little bit like George Lucas. The king decides that an attack might be a bit extreme and sends one of the members of the council to give Alderaan their decision with the treaty. A little bit after this, Kain and Anakin arrive on the planet and Kain reunites with Luke Skywalker. Kain asks Luke to take his son as his Padawan learner. He then reveals to Luke that he's dying, and after many encounters with the Empire, he's almost completely a cyborg. Only his right arm and his head remain. The first issue ends with the news that something large is coming. Issue 2 starts out with the group trying to figure out what's coming. All they know is that it's a solid object as large as their 3rd moon. Kain Starkiller then leaves to visit his old friend Han Solo. Later that night, the large object disappears from their sensors. After that, they learn from a captain that the Imperial Star Force is coming and are hiding behind a fortress. Luke Skywalker tells Anakin to travel to Kathos, which is where the king's daughter, Princess Leia, is. Luke tells Anakin to evacuate her from the school as fast as possible. Anakin listens to his master and attempts to get the princess to safety. However, she doesn't immediately go with him. They argue and eventually begin to fight. The fight ends when Anakin lands a punch, knocking her out cold. And you thought the regular Anakin was intense. The next day, the Empire attacks the planet. Some of General Skywalker's forces, called Devil Squadron, fly out to meet the space station as it shoots the planet. Now in the space station, we meet a different version of R2-D2 and C-3PO. Now along with the way they look, another difference between this version and the one in the movies is the fact that R2-D2 can talk. The 2 eventually evacuate the space station and head for the planet. Meanwhile, Devil Squadron suffers heavy casualties and are only down to 2 members. The King's royal convoy was also destroyed, killing the King. The senators and queen try to surrender to the Empire, which the Empire accepts. However, despite the surrender, it's clear after the Empire blows up the remaining 2 fighters that there is no peace. So the beginning of issue 3 starts out with C-3PO and R2-D2 falling towards the planet, and Vader giving a speech about how this will be a new millennium for the Empire. After that, the 2 androids, as they're called in this universe, crash on the planet's surface and begin to argue. After a short while, 3PO gets tired of R2, and so he picks him up and throws him. They split up, and after going their separate ways, R2 runs into Anakin and the princess's speeder. He chooses not to talk, so they assume that he's damaged and they take him with him. Now, Anakin and Leia don't seem to like each other very much, with Leia telling Anakin that her father's gonna kill him when they both get back. They continue to argue, and while doing so, they almost miss C-3PO nearby calling for help. R2 starts talking and tells them to pick up his friend. After that, Leia leads them to a boulder that's blocking a secret entrance. They head down the tunnel, where they eventually meet Luke Skywalker, who informs the princess that her father was killed. Leia is devastated by the news. Leia's mother informs the group that she's not strong enough to lead or to be queen. She wants Leia to be the new queen, and now she asks the 2 Jedi to protect her and get her somewhere safe. Luke Skywalker makes plans to leave the planet, and as he does, the Empire, led by Vader, lands on the planet. A little while later, Prince Valorum, who's a Knight of the Sith, arrives to assist Vader in finding General Skywalker. Luke Skywalker's group heads out and are now accompanied by Whitson, General Skywalker's friend, and Leia's 2 twin brothers. As the group travels through the wasteland, they're ambushed and attacked by Imperial forces at a refueling station. In this universe, Imperial forces carry lightsabers. They eventually escape and split up into 2 speeders. Issue 4 starts out with the group still in the wasteland. Anakin is with Leia and her 2 siblings, while Luke, Whitson, and the androids are in another. After spotting an Imperial patrol again, they decide to split up. Luke and Whitson are again attacked by Imperial troopers, and after fighting the troopers, 2 escape and attack the other speeder, leaving Anakin slightly wounded. Now after all of this, they eventually make it to Gordon Spaceport, which is essentially this universe's version of Mos Eisley. They go into a cantina, and just like in A New Hope, they have an interaction with wanted men who have the death sentence in 12 systems. They handle the situation and leave the cantina, where they meet up with this version of Han Solo, who looks very different. In this version, he's a large green alien with gills on his face. Han leads them to Kane's Starkiller, who's been waiting there with Han the whole time. In order to leave the planet, they need to put the 2 twins in suspended animation in these things called power packs. However, they can only get 1 unit to charge the power packs. Rather than leave one of the twins behind on the planet, Starkiller sacrifices himself, giving them a unit in his cybernetic body. He tells his son goodbye and then dies. After they put the twins to sleep, they head to board a freighter. Their plan is to get the princess off the planet so that she can eventually return and lead a revolt against the Empire. Alright, so that's where I'm going to end the video, at the end of issue 4. Part 2 will come out in 2 weeks. Next week, I'm going to be talking about the cancelled Knights of the Old Republic 3 video game. I think this version of the story is very cool and interesting. It feels like a mix of A New Hope and The Phantom Menace. But what did you guys think? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. May the Force be with you all.